In a recent conversation with Andrew Huberman, Coach Pavel details his method for getting stronger, the greasing the groove method. He claims that trainees can lift heavy weights frequently, far from failure, and make tremendous strength gains. Is this possible? Do we no longer need to train to failure? Let's explore. I'm a coach, and I've helped tons of people get big and strong. I've actually used the greasing the groove method before, so I'm definitely qualified to speak on it, though Coach Pavel's explanation is a little different than what I'm used to hearing. So let's listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, grease the groove, we are talking about, let's use an analogy. Let's imagine that you are a bow hunter and you work in your garage, and then you walk out of your garage. This is the best way to practice your skill in small portions in a spaced out manner. To summarize the grease the groove, you're trying to train moderately heavy as often as possible while staying as fresh as possible.
In the clip, Coach Pavel is focusing on the skill acquisition aspects of strength training. While muscle size and strength are closely related and correlated, there isn't a one-to-one relationship. And so just because you have muscles, just because you look like you're strong, doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be strong. Because strength requires training to express it. And that training needs to be specific. It needs to be geared towards the adaptations you want to express. This is a fancy way of saying that if you want to get better at something, you need to do that thing. So if you want to get stronger, you need to lift heavy weights, because we are defining strength as your ability to express 1 rep max strength, your ability to express maximal strength. And so by training more frequently, further from failure, you give your body more opportunities to learn that skill. On a technical, biological level, what you're actually doing is teaching your brain how to coordinate your nervous system. You are teaching your brain to make your motor neurons fire more quickly and efficiently so that you can utilize the muscles you have to express your potential strength. There is also a mental, conscious component here, because it takes skill to execute a movement consistently and effectively. If you're trying to squat maximal weights, there are better and worse ways to squat, and you need to teach yourself, you need to give yourself the opportunity to learn the best way to squat for you. And the best way to do that is to expose yourself to an effective stimulus frequently. And so Coach Pavel's method makes a ton of sense. You're using a challenging weight and you're performing effective reps. These reps are still far from failure, but they are specific because they are heavy. They are still geared towards expressing maximal strength. And in fact, because you're training farther from failure, this means that the reps themselves will never slow down too much. This is important because when performing a 1 rep max, when expressing maximal strength, you will in fact move that weight slowly. It is impossible to move a 1 rep max quickly. However, in order to complete that rep, in order to lift as much as you can, you need to lift it as fast as you can. I know that may sound like a contradiction, but what I'm saying is, while the movement will be slow, in order for you to complete the rep, you have to move it as quickly as you possibly can. And so what that means is that when you are training, you need to focus on moving the weights as fast as you can. You need to train your body to fire those motor neurons quickly and efficiently so that you can complete lifts. And that means that taking sub-maximal weights to failure might actually not help with your strength as much, because you're moving sub-maximal weights slowly, when in fact what you need to do is move maximal weights as quickly as you possibly can. So again, this method in theory makes a ton of sense, and the way it's explained here is practical and useful. Now let's listen as Coach Pavel talks about the necessity of using heavy weights.
To get stronger, first of all, you need to lift weights that are heavy enough. And if you're looking about percentages of 1 rep max, we're looking at like 75 to 85 typically.
Again, this comes down to the principle of specificity. You're trying to increase maximal strength. You're trying to increase your ability to lift as much as you possibly can. And thus, the weights have to be heavy enough to engender that adaptation. He makes a crucial distinction here. Lifting maximal weights all the time, your literal 1 rep max, will probably burn most people out. So lifting somewhere between 70 to 85% is probably that sweet spot where you can still get effective strength adaptations without causing undue and unnecessary stress. Lastly, Coach Pavel makes an interesting point at the end that I think undermines the persuasiveness of his argument a little bit. Here he talks about rest periods.
And if you decide to do it in the gym, a very simple protocol would be a set every 10 minutes. It sounds really bizarre. Like, why? Why would you rest for so long? This apparently has to do with initial memory consolidation.
This is an interesting point. Pavel is arguing that you need to rest about 10 minutes in between sets. Pavel is asserting this because he's biasing performance here. He wants each set to be performed to the best of your abilities in as low a fatigue state as possible. Thus, he's recommending you rest for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, I'm not certain that 10 minutes is necessary, but I think it's a decent benchmark for his goals right here in this context. But here's the problem. This is deeply, deeply inefficient. Let me give you a concrete example to show this. You're doing the bench press. You're going to do a set at 80% of your 1 rep max. For that first set, you're going to do 3 reps. You're going to rest 10 minutes, and you're going to do that for an entire hour. So for the course of that hour, you're going to perform 6 sets, and you're going to get a total of 18 reps at 80% of your 1 rep max. It's going to take you an hour to get 18 reps. Conversely, if you just trained how a bodybuilder typically might train, so you take that 80% of your 1 rep max and you stop 1 rep shy of failure and you rest roughly 3 minutes in between sets. So the first set you get 7 reps, then 6, and then 5. That's 18 reps done in 10 minutes, in 1/6 the time it would take if you were resting 10 minutes between sets. And I would also argue that in that scenario where you're doing 7-6-5, your hypertrophic gains might actually be better because you're training closer to failure on all those sets. It's possible that your strength gains might be slightly diminished because, as I explained, some of those reps are going to be slower, but you're going to potentially grow more muscle. So it's probably a wash. Maybe they're equivalent. And it takes 1/6 of the time. So what you could do instead is just more work. You could do more sets of the bench press, you could do other chest exercises, and so you could take that hour of time and make significantly greater muscular gains. And even if those strength gains might be slightly diminished because of the accumulated fatigue, I think the added muscle mass would actually compensate and make up for that. And so again, while I think this method makes sense in theory, the way it's laid out here isn't really the most practical. The best way to do greasing the groove is not with concentrated gym sessions. It's with little micro doses of training throughout the day. And this is something I've had trainees do. The best example of this I can give you is with pull-ups. Let's say you have a pull-up bar at home. When you wake up in the morning, do a couple reps of pull-ups. When you get home from work, do a couple reps of pull-ups. Before you go to bed, do a couple reps of pull-ups. If you do that frequently over time, you will absolutely get stronger at pull-ups, and it won't really feel like you're doing much. It will feel like magic. It will be precisely as Coach Pavel has promised here. You'll be putting in relatively little work for a lot of reward. I think implementing greasing the groove in this fashion is far more effective than trying to get in a bunch of concerted, concentrated strength work in one training session. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you've used this method before, let me know in the comments.